Today, I'm going to talk about a certain Atlanta Hawk basketball player that has been arguably the biggest disappointment on the team. And before I tell you who that player is, I want to tell you guys to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell whoever to support my channel.
Big as the Super Bowl.
I want to talk about a certain Atlanta Hawk player that has been the biggest disappointment on the team this season. A player that I've been underwhelmed, let down. And that player that I'm going to mention on this episode today is Zaccharie Risacher of the Atlanta Hawks. The former number one pick in the 2024 NBA draft, Zaccharie Risacher. I've been disappointed in Zaccharie Risacher this season. I admit it's really been a disappointment for Zaccharie Risacher in year two. It's been a disappointment from Zaccharie Risacher. And look, man, you look at his numbers over the course of the season. He's averaging 10 points a game. He's shooting 44% from the field. He's shooting 35% from three. And he's averaging 1 assist barely, and he's averaging 3 rebounds. I mean, it's been not great for Zaccharie Risacher. And if you really look at his numbers, in the month of February, they're a lot worse. If you look at what Zaccharie Risacher has done in the month of February, he's averaging 6.7 points a game on 32% shooting and 32% from three. Let me repeat that. Zaccharie Risacher in the month of February is averaging 6.7 points a game on 32% shooting and 32% from three. And in 5 of those 7 games that Zaccharie Risacher has had, he's had games in which he's scored 0 points, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, and against the Miami Heat last night, 4 points on 1 of 8 shooting. And if you really watch that game against the Miami Heat, for about 46 minutes of that game, Zaccharie Risacher had 0 points, which means Zaccharie Risacher was on the verge of having his second game in which he was held scoreless in 6 games. This isn't good, man. This isn't good, man. Zaccharie Risacher is struggling right now for the Atlanta Hawks. And look, he's also been now to his defense, he's also been a little nicked up at times throughout the portion of the year as well. I think he suffered a leg injury. I want to say around December or so, and he also missed time in early January. I think he missed like 10 games. You know, he injured himself. I think it was like January 7th, and he came back on like January 31st. And so he ended up missing about a good 3 to 4 weeks. And so that has to be stated as well. But even still, I mean, to have this stretch in which in 5 of your 7 games you've been in single digits scoring the basketball, and you actually start on the Atlanta Hawks it's pretty disturbing, to say the least. And to me, the concern with Zaccharie Risacher, and look, obviously this is a guy that the Atlanta Hawks drafted number 1 overall in 2024, and look, that was deemed a weak draft. And so I know as fans we do this where we want to compare Zaccharie Risacher to all these number 1 picks, and we expect him to put up number 1 pick production. I think that's a little unfair, because that draft was indeed weak, and so you don't want to base your expectations on Zaccharie Risacher putting up numbers on a comparison scale to guys like Victor Wembanyama or Cooper Flagg or Anthony Edwards or Cade Cunningham. You don't want to or like early career Zion. I think it's unfair to expect Zaccharie Risacher to put up numbers comparable to those guys. But at the same time, at the very least, you expect like lottery pick level production out of Zaccharie Risacher. And in a year two, he just hasn't provided it. He hasn't provided, not forget about number one pick, not forget about production levels of a guy that's a number one pick. Like, that was never going to happen. But we're not even getting a guy that's worthy of a lottery pick, this season from Zaccharie Risacher. And that has been disappointing. And I think with Risacher, the appeal of Zaccharie Risacher coming out from France was this guy was supposed to be this big time 3-and-D guy, a guy that's supposed to be a high level defender, and he's a guy that's supposed to provide some offense as far as like making open threes, right? Play defense, hit threes. Like, that was the thing with Zaccharie Risacher, and that's the reason he went as high as he did in 2024, and why the Hawks took him in 2024. It was 3-and-D. Defend, be 6'9" wing who can guard multiple positions and hit open threes. The defense from Zaccharie Risacher has actually been pretty okay. Like, I think his defense has been like serviceable. Like, I think he's done a nice job competing on defense. He's in the right spots. You see him, trying and competing on the ball. He doesn't have the strength at times, and that gets him in trouble, but he's competing on defense. And so I want to give Risacher credit in that regard as far as his defense. I think his defense has been pretty solid, but the offense has been horrific. And specifically his three-point shooting, especially late. Like, this is a guy that's supposed to be a guy that can make shots, and he's not doing it. Like, he's not making shots. And along with Zaccharie Risacher not making shots is his ball handling. He's not really much of a ball handler. Like, you see him struggle when he's pressured with his handle, so he doesn't really have a tight handle. And when opposing teams are putting their worst defenders on him, you're not seeing Risacher take advantage of those mismatches. And so the fact that teams are comfortable enough to put their weak defenders on Risacher, and Risacher is incapable of making these teams pay, like, that's a problem. So his ball handling to me is limited. He's still not strong. He's not finishing at the rim through contact. And so, considering the fact that he's a limited ball handler, and the fact that he's not finishing at the rim through contact, he's missing layups, and some of them aren't close. As a result, it's from Risacher's offensive value, he has to make shots. And if he's not making shots on the offensive end, then he's borderline useless on the offensive end of the court right now. And that, to me, has been a disappointing development for Risacher in year two. It's just the offense just isn't there right now. And defensively, even though I think he's useful on that side of the ball, he's not impactful on that end of the court the way Dyson Daniels is. And look, Dyson Daniels, his offense has kind of been up and down as well, especially as a shooter. But at least with Dyson Daniels, this guy makes plays defensively. He gets steals. He can lock up your opposing team's best perimeter scoring option. He can get blocks. He's in the rotations. Like you see offensively, even though he's not shooting the ball well, he can pass. He can drive and get in the lane. He can crash the offensive glass and the defensive glass. Like, he makes up for his lack of shooting in other areas of the court, which is why Dyson Daniels, even though he can't shoot, he's still an impactful player. Dyson, whereas compared to Zaccharie Risacher, he's not an impactful player right now on a court, and that to me is a problem with what I've seen from Zaccharie Risacher this year. And so it's just the impact just isn't there for Risacher. Look, I get it. He's in year two, and he's only 20 years old. And so you don't want to, be too hard on the kid, but man, like I expected more out of Zaccharie Risacher in year 2, and the production just isn't there with him right now. You want to look at one of the main reasons why I think the Atlanta Hawks have been under 500. I think the reasons why the Atlanta Hawks are under 500 is the lack of center depth, with Porzingis, who obviously he got traded, right? And so the center play and depth just hasn't been there. Onyeka Okongwu, I think, is doing the best job that he can, and he's been productive, but he's 6'9". He's a 6'9" center, and he's playing a lot of minutes. And so there's only so much a 6'9" center that's not a star player can do. And so that's been a problem. And I think the other problem for the team is Zaccharie Risacher. Like, we're not getting production out of him. And Quin Snyder doesn't trust him. He's not playing late in games, and he's not playing late in games for a reason. It's because he's not good enough on the offensive end of the court. And I think what's telling about Risacher is if you look at the game against the Miami Heat, and the Hawks played a poor game against the Miami Heat. They got blown out by 30. Nobody played well in that game. But you know what's telling in that game against the Miami Heat is what happens in the end. Because usually when there's a blowout happening, you have these things called garbage time lineups, in which you're playing some of your worst players at the end of these games. Like, your key contributors are on the bench in a blowout. Whereas, on the court, it's usually your bench players, your 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th men. That's usually the guys that's on the court in a blowout. Zaccharie Risacher was in the garbage time lineup. At the end of the game. He was on the court with guys like Keaton Wallace and Corey Kispert and Mo Gay, and Jock Landale. Zaccharie Risacher is on the court at the end of these games. When it's a blowout, when there's nothing to play for. Usually, when you're on the court in a garbage time lineup, that typically means that the coach doesn't think that highly of you as a player. It typically means that the coach doesn't think that you're good, that you're that good. And I just look at Zach, and I look at Quin Snyder, and I look at how he's been using Zaccharie Risacher, this season, and even at times last season. I'm up the, maybe I'll end up being wrong on this, but I don't know if Quin Snyder thinks all that highly about Zaccharie Risacher as a basketball player. And the truth is, I kind of don't blame Quin Snyder if he doesn't think that Zaccharie Risacher is that good of a player. I'm sorry, but I don't think Quin Snyder thinks that highly of Zaccharie Risacher right now as a player. One can make an argument that did Quin Snyder even want Zaccharie Risacher in that draft in 2024? There were those reports that Quin Snyder was very interested in wanted Jonathan Kuminga from the center that eventually went to the Portland Trail Blazers. And Jonathan Kuminga is having a nice little impact for the Portland Trail Blazers right now. He's been really good for them. One can wonder, like, what would happen if Jonathan Kuminga was on the Atlanta Hawks instead of Zaccharie Risacher, and the Atlanta Hawks had a strong center rotation with Jonathan Kuminga and Onyeka Okongwu. How different things would look right now for this team. It's just a thought. And look, I don't want to bury Zaccharie Risacher too much, because who knows, maybe things can turn around for the kid. But if we're basing on how things have looked over the course of this season in year 2, I just think there's just no denying that Zaccharie Risacher has been a big disappointment. His year 2 season for the Atlanta Hawks has been a monumental disappointment so far. And long term, when I look at Zaccharie Risacher, I'll be honest. I'm gonna be honest. I'm kind of worried. I'm pretty concerned about how Zaccharie Risacher is going to look moving forward for the Atlanta Hawks, because I don't know if you guys, noticed, but the Atlanta Hawks actually made a trade at the trade deadline. They traded Kristaps Porzingis for Jonathan Kuminga. Heard of him? Now, Jonathan Kuminga, he's been out, with a knee injury, his in his own right. But Jonathan Kuminga is going to come back very soon, as early as this coming week. When the Hawks play the Wizards. I think they play them Tuesday and Thursday. So I would anticipate that Jonathan Kuminga is going to be back by at least one of those Wizards games. And so he's going to be in the lineup. And he's going to be playing, Risacher's spot. Kuminga, he can play the 4, but he can play some 3 as well. And so, and we all know Kuminga is not going to be taking Jalen Johnson's minutes. Jalen Johnson's a star. And so you're going to be seeing Jonathan Kuminga in the rotation. He's going to be playing, some of the minutes that Risacher is going to be, he's going to be playing some of the minutes that Risacher's had. And so here's a question. Like, what happens if Jonathan Kuminga comes in to the Atlanta Hawks? And what happens if he balls out? What happens if Jonathan Kuminga comes in and he looks like the player that he was in Golden State a couple of years ago when he was averaging 16 points a game on elite efficiency, and he was looking like a guy that was breaking out in year 3? What happens if that Jonathan Kuminga is that Jonathan Kuminga for the Atlanta Hawks? What would that mean for Zaccharie Risacher? Because I got news for people. Jonathan Kuminga is coming in to this Atlanta Hawks team, and there's no doubt in my mind he's looking at this situation. It's like, man, I'm the best. I'm better than Zaccharie Risacher. I'm that guy. I'm that dude. Zaccharie Risacher is playing more minutes than me. What? No, I'm Jonathan Kuminga. I am flat out better than Zaccharie Risacher. That's what Jonathan Kuminga is thinking, and he should think that way. And so, what happens if Jonathan Kuminga comes in and he just kills it, and he just finds his niche on the Atlanta Hawks? And then also keep this in mind, and another reason why I'm concerned about Zaccharie Risacher and his future with this team long term. What happens if not only if Jonathan Kuminga comes in and he plays well, but what happens if the Atlanta Hawks get a top 5 pick? And look, man, for those of y'all that haven't been paying attention, the Atlanta Hawks own the New Orleans Pelicans pick. And the New Orleans Pelicans, as of today, would be projected to pick 3rd in the draft, which means the Hawks could be looking at a top 3 pick or a top 5 pick. And I don't know if y'all been paying attention to what's been happening in college basketball right now, but there's a whole bunch of studs in this draft. And we talking about A.J. DeBanza, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, Kingston Fleming. You got the Darius Acuff, the point guard from Arkansas. You got Mikael Brown, the point guard from Louisville. Keegan Wagler, the Illinois point guard. Like, there's a lot of talent. You got Nate Ament, the wing from Tennessee. Like, there's a lot of studs in this draft. Make no mistake about it. And so what happens if the Atlanta Hawks get one of those guys? What happens if the Atlanta Hawks get A.J. DeBanza or Darren Peterson or Kingston Fleming? What happens if the Atlanta Hawks get one of them dudes or Cam Boozer? All of a sudden, one of those guys, along with Jonathan Kuminga, and if he's able to play well for the Hawks, all of a sudden you look at Zaccharie Risacher's role on the team, and it's like, oh man, well, where does Zaccharie Risacher fit? And so, with the way Zaccharie Risacher's been playing this season, and you look at Jonathan Kuminga, and if he plays well, and the Atlanta Hawks get a top 5 pick, and they take a DeBanza or a Peterson or a Fleming or a Boozer or any of these guys, where's the role long term for Zaccharie Risacher? I'm gonna be honest. I think it's kind of hard to find a role for him on the team long term if things play out the way that they could. And if Kuminga plays well and the Hawks keep him and resign him, and if they get a top 5 pick, there's a lot at stake for Zaccharie Risacher moving forward, man. Look, I know he was the number 1 pick in the 2024 NBA draft. I get it. But honestly, Salah didn't draft him. Landry Fields did. Landry Fields was the general manager when Zaccharie Risacher was drafted. Landry Fields is gone. Honestly, Salah doesn't have any connection to Zaccharie Risacher. He doesn't. And so make no mistake about this. If Zaccharie Risacher is struggling the rest of the way, and if Jonathan Kuminga comes into the Atlanta Hawks and he plays well, and the Hawks get a top pick in this draft, I really do not think that honestly Salah would hesitate to move on from Risacher this offseason. It could happen. It absolutely could happen if Zaccharie Risacher is struggling and Kuminga plays well and the Hawks get a top 5 pick and they take Boozer or Dabansa or Fleming or Peterson or any of these dudes. Because this is a loaded draft coming up. The players in the top 7 or 8 in this draft are way better prospects than what Risacher was when he came out. And so the guys that the Hawks draft in this draft, they're going to be a higher priority. They're going to be a guy that they're going to prioritize in their future, along with Jalen Johnson, because honestly, Salah's in charge. And so, make no mistake about it, there's a lot at stake for Zaccharie Risacher moving forward for the Atlanta Hawks, and he's gonna have to figure some things out, man, because we can talk about how young he is and all of this stuff, but look, man, in this NBA team, if you ain't doing your thing by year 3, the team's gonna move on from you. Teams are not gonna give you 4, 5, 6 years to find your way in the NBA. Teams are gonna move on from you if you ain't clicking by year 3 at the latest. And I don't even know if Risacher's gonna get that much time. Depending on how this offseason plays out and how some of these players, Jonathan Kuminga specifically, and how he looks. If Jonathan Kuminga comes into the Atlanta Hawks and he looks good and he's balling and he's looking like a stud, they might move on from Risacher this summer. It could happen. And I wouldn't blame Monty Salah for making that move if he decided to. And so, look, man, this year 2 for Zaccharie Risacher has been a disappointment, man. No question about it for the Atlanta Hawks. Now, he's not the only reason that this team has been up and down, but he's a part of it. He's a real part of it. Like the fact that he hasn't become a reliable starting NBA small forward for the Atlanta Hawks is a problem. It's a problem. It's just this. It's just the reality. And so yeah, man. It has not been a good sophomore year for Zaccharie Risacher. You look at what he's been doing in the month of February. The numbers are pretty ugly. And look, man. The Atlanta Hawks this season, they're kind of where they are. They're 27-31. They're under 500. They're in 9th place in the Eastern Conference. And we'll see what happens moving forward. And we'll see if Zaccharie Risacher can, step his game up a little bit. But that's all I have for today. And I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Talk soon. Peace.